Hi guys, and welcome back. In this video, we are going to be looking at VLANs. The first thing I'm going to do before we get started is to ping or to send a broadcast using any of these computers. Really, I'll use this one just to see how the broadcast behave in a network that does not have a VLAN configured on it. So I'm going to ping 192.168.10 because I'm using a PC on the .10 network. So I'm going to ping the last IP address, which is the broadcast address. And I meant to actually use the simulation mode. So let's go to simulation mode. So I'm going to use the simulation. As you can see, the broadcast goes to all the devices on the network. That's because a switch by default is a single broadcast domain, which basically just means that all the devices that are connected will receive that broadcast. So what VLANs does or attempts to do is to break down the broadcast domain. In this case, we have three different networks: VLAN 10, VLAN 20, and VLAN 30. After we have successfully configured our VLAN, we should have three broadcast domains, meaning that a PC on VLAN 10 cannot broadcast to VLAN 20 or 30 and vice versa, which helps in that it reduces the amount of traffic running in the network, which helps improve the performance of the network. So let's go ahead and configure the VLAN. So we're going to start with this computer over here, and then we are going to give each device an IP address and a default gateway. So I'm going to enter the IP address 30.5. As you can see, I have the IP addresses already selected for the computers. So I'm just going to put that information in, and the DG is the default gateway. So this is what I'll be entering here. So it's going to be 192.168.30.1, and then I'll do the same for the second computer. 192.168.10.6. I will leave the subnet mask as a /24, and then I'll enter the default gateway, which is .10.1. Note the default gateway is always the first IP address of that particular network. Well, not always, but it's advisable to do so. It makes it easier for other people to understand your configurations. So that's what we choose. That's what I chose. 192.168.20.1. I will leave the subnet mask as it is, and then I'm going to enter the default gateway, which is the first address on that network. So I have done the IP addresses of the rest of the computers. So you're just going to go ahead and follow the same steps. I'm not going to go around doing the rest of this IP address for the sake of the length of the video. So now we are going to configure the switch. So you're going to open the CLI of the switch, enable, and then configure terminal. Now we're in the global config mode. So the first thing we do is, if you look here, I have three VLANs. We have to introduce these VLANs to the switch or on the switch. So we're gonna say VLAN 10, and then now we are on the VLAN config mode. So we are going to give it a name, and I'm going to call it sales. If you look here, I have the names of each department. So we have sales, we have IT, and we have finance. So these are the departments within this organization. So I'm going to name it sales, since that's the first, that's VLAN 10. And then I'm going to do the second VLAN, which is VLAN 20, and give it a name as well. And the name is IT. Then VLAN 30. Then the name is finance. VLAN 30 is finance. And now let's exit this mode. I'll say do show R, or rather do show VLAN brief, just to have a brief overview of our VLAN configuration. Now, if you look, we do have the 3 VLANs that are configured. However, there's no port assigned to any of these VLANs. All the ports are still under default VLAN, which is VLAN number 1. So all these ports on my switch, this is the front view of the switch, all 24 ports, including these 2 ports over here, they are assigned to default VLAN. So now we need to assign the appropriate ports to the sales department. So is the IT and the finance. So we have to go back to our network and look at which port connects to the appropriate department in VLAN, right? So if you look closely, you'll see that on FA0/1 we have the blue PC, and the blue is VLAN 30. So we're gonna come here and say, okay, interface F0/1, enter. Now we are in that interface config, right? IF is interface. Now we are going to assign that port as assigned to VLAN 1. And we'll do so by saying switch mode, or switch port mode access. We want this to be an access port. We hit enter, and then we say switch port access. We want to access VLAN 30, because it's a blue VLAN, so it's VLAN 30. All right, and now we can go back just to look at our VLAN brief configurations. So if you look again at the VLAN brief, you'll see that our first port is assigned to finance, which is VLAN 30. So we're going to do the same for sales and IT. So we go to the next interface. You might have to move your PCs around just to make sure you're on the right port. So interface F0/2 switch port mode access, and switch port access VLAN. This time around is going to be VLAN 10 because it's the yellow VLAN. Okay, now we'll go back again to interface 3, and then switch port mode access, switch port access VLAN what is it, 20. Yeah, the purple one is 20. Remember, you need to look at the connections. Now show as you can see, we have the 3 ports assigned to our VLANs, and they have been taken out from that default VLAN. So we are done on this port. Now we have to go to do the same thing on this switch over here. Now we introduce the VLANs again. I won't comment as I'm going over this since it's the same process as the first switch. So I'm just going to continue typing in silence. We have our 3 VLANs over there. Now we are going to go ahead and assign ports to those VLANs. So we need to look at the computers connected. The first port has the VLAN 20 or the purple network. So we can say interface fast Ethernet 0/1. Now you can see we left the VLAN config. We are now in the interface config. So we are going to give it we're going to make it an access port, and then we are going to access VLAN 30, or rather 20. The purple one is 20, and then we're going to do the same for the rest. So we're going to go to F2, which is that one, and switch port access, switch port mode access, and then switch port access VLAN 10, the yellow one, and therefore the last one would be the VLAN 30, the blue one. So if I do show VLAN brief, we do see that now our ports are assigned to our corresponding VLANs. I will go ahead and do the third switch, probably quietly without talking. Now, if you look, there you go. We have our 3 ports assigned to each of those VLANs. Now, at this point, we cannot have any of the pings going through, because this switch over here, which joins everyone else in the node to the network, is the one that brings it all together. It knows nothing about our VLANs. It knows nothing about this new configuration. So we have to go and tell it about the new configure, about the VLANs. So I want to configure the switch as well. Say config t And now we have to introduce the VLANs to that switch. So VLAN 10. There's no need to name the VLANs on this one, to be quite honest. Maybe depending on your application you might need to, but in this exercise there's no need to name the VLANs. You just need to tell it that we have VLAN 10, 20, and 30. But sales, finance, IT department, that's not very important, especially for this switch here at the center. So after we've given the names, we're going to exit the Vlan config mode. Now I want to configure the trunk. We are going to configure the trunk on this link, configure trunk on this link, configure trunk on that link, and that one. The reason being that now that we have VLANs, each packet that moves along the trunk has to be tagged, and only trunk links can move tagged information, right? So that is the reason why we have to configure this as trunk. Now we are going to do that by configuring again the switch at the center. And how we do this is we tell it, we configure these 4 ports, right? So it's going to be all the first 4 ports of that switch. So I'm just going to make it a range. So I'm going to say interface range F0/1 2 4, right? It's a range. As you can see, I have, now you could do it one at a time, but to save time I just collectively configure all 4 at once. So what we're going to do next is we're going to tell the switch that these are now trunk ports and not access ports or any other kind of port. So we're going to say switch port mode, right? Instead of access we say trunk, because this is now as a trunk. Now as you can see, the fast Ethernet 0/1 went down and then it went back up. So does all the other 3. What happened to the 4th one? Oh, the reason the 4th one we don't see it is because this is still down because of the router. The router is down over there. So I will continue to do the configurations. So now we're going to say switch mode or switch port trunk, and then if you type shift ? you will see that we have 2 other commandlets, allow and native. We're not going to touch on the native VLANs just yet, so we're only looking at the allowed. So here you put in allowed. These are the VLANs allowed. So what VLAN is allowed? You want to allow VLAN 10, or rather we want to allow all. Okay, you can put one at a time, or you can just say all. There is an invalid. Okay, I made a mistake. I should have typed VLAN then all. Right, so now all the VLANs are allowed. So if I go and say do show trunk, or rather do show interface trunk, right, it will show me the information regarding the trunk ports. So you can see that I have FA 1 to 3, and I allowed all the VLANs that are in the system. Now I'm not sure what will happen with FA 0/4. I'm hoping that when I bring up this link it will auto configure, but I might have to configure it separately. So actually we are done with the switch here. So now we should get some pings going, but only the pings for this for the same network, meaning that the blue network can only ping the blue PCs, or rather the blue PC can only ping the blue PCs and not the other colored computers, right? So you can only ping within the same network. So let's try and see if that's possible. So now I'm going to ping .5 over here, right? So let's see if I can ping that .5. I will enter. As you can see, the ping now does go through. However, if I attempt to ping a different network, let's say 192.168.10, or the 10, which is the yellow network, .6, which is the PC over here, I shouldn't go anywhere. I shouldn't get any pings through. I'll just fast forward over here a bit. As you can see, everything timed out. And the reason for that is because this is a different network. The only way you can go from one network to the other network is through a router. Now we need to configure our router for us to be able to route between these different VLANs, right? So we are going to the router and we are going to configure the router. So we will enable config T, and now we're going to say interface. Okay, another thing about this is that we are now going to introduce gateways to our router. Remember, let's do this. With a router, you know that every network has a default gateway. So we have 3 networks within our topology. Now, each network has to have its own gateway, but we only have one link, right? So how do we do it? We do something called sub interfaces, meaning we break that one interface into 3 little sub interfaces. We do that by doing the following. First of all, we will open the actual interface, gigabit Ethernet 0/0, right? That's the actual interface, is this one over here. Now we're gonna no shut down, which means we want to bring it up, and we press enter, and as you can see, the green LED pointing up arrow there, the ember will eventually become green as well. So that link is up. Now that we have done that, we can configure the sub interfaces, right? So you simply do that by typing n interface gigabit Ethernet 0/0.10. This could be any number, right? This can be any number. It can be 254. It can be anything, as long as it's something different other than. The only way I name it 10 is because I want it to be consistent. I want it to be something easier for me to read and understand. So I'll make it 10 because this will be my gateway for my .10 VLAN. Okay, so that's the only reason I'm getting 10. I don't know if you can give it alphabets. I've never tried it, but I suspect it's only numbers. You could do that too. You could give it an M, but yeah, I'm gonna give it 10. So I'm just letting you know that it's up to you. You can give it anything you want. I just think it has to be a number though, not an alphabet. As long as you remember what VLAN is assigned to that sub interface. So for me, it's easier to remember if I give it a .10 because I know it's for the 10 VLAN. So now let's continue. Now that if you look closely, you see that I'm in the sub IF, which is sub interface. So now I'm in the sub interface config mode. So I am going to go ahead and give it an IP address. All right. Okay, let's first look at the sub commandlets, or the commandlets of this config mode. By entering shift and question mark, you will see all the sub commandlets in that config mode. So it's these, but we're only going to focus on the encapsulation and the IP. This is just a standard used to tag VLANs. And now this is where we give it the IP address or the default gateway. So I'm going to start with the encapsulation, and it's going to be the .1q, and then you put in the VLAN that you want to encapsulate in that, right? Is the .10, so you define the VLAN, so is the VLAN 10, and then you enter. Now the next thing will be the IP address, which is the default gateway of that network, which is 10.1. You're gonna have to give it the subnet mask because it's the /24. I'm gonna type in that, and that will be it. Now we go back to create another sub interface within our gigabit Ethernet 0/0. So it is interface gigabit Ethernet 0/0.20 for my .20 network. Again, you can give it any number you want, but I want to make it easy for myself, so I make it .20. Again, you'll see I'm back in the sub interface. Now we are going to encapsulate .1q, and this time around we're going to give it a VLAN of 20, and we are going to give it an IP address of 192.168.20.1, 255.255.255.0. Same thing with interface G0/0.30 for the 30th for the others VLAN, and encapsulation .1q 30 IP address 192.168.30.1, 255.255.255.0. There we go. So we can just go back, exit, do show, run, and as you can see, we have under our interface, we have sub interfaces here, the 3 sub interfaces, and they all have their own IP addresses. So now this acts like a 3-link port, like it behaves as if like there are 3 links, one for each network. That's what it's also called a router on the stick. That's what they mean by router on the stick. It just means you are able to route multiple gateways on one cable. That's what a trunk is, right? So now I should be able to ping across different networks. I couldn't do it, so now let's see if I can do it. Let's see if this will go through. It's taking a bit of time. There you go. Now we get our pings going through. If you want to see how it works over the simulation mode, let's just try that. It might make things it might help make things easier to understand. Easy. So now I'm going to ping again and see what happens. So as you can see, the ping is going through. It goes to the router first. It reports to the router strips the tag, it introduces the right tag, and then it sends off the packet. Now, okay, it's just a big mess now. There are a lot of other things, but that's the orange envelope went from a PC to the router to the PC, back from the PC to the router again. So that's how it goes, right? That's how it goes. It goes through just like that. So yes, we have successfully created our VLAN network.